Well, hey everybody, it is Monday all day long. Well, let's see, if you're over in Australia, it's Tuesday. So good morning, hello. Hope your Monday or coming Tuesday is good. And thank you for joining us. It's an honor to have you here, and we certainly appreciate it. We, meaning the community, it's not just the guy behind the microphone and camera, you know. It's y'all. Y'all are the audience out there. So how are you doing? Let's see. Hey, David Barry, how are you doing? Happy holidays to everybody. I know this week for most people is a holiday week. So hope that's the case. And if so, I hope you're having fun. Put the fun back into the holidays. That's what I say. And however you decide to, you know, celebrate it, do it with gusto, do it with heart, and do it with great intent. Hello, Grandpa Brian. How are you doing? Ethos Eternal. I haven't seen you here before. Hello, Robert. Good to see you. Hello, Twisted Isby. I see you're back in. Critical Thinker. Hey, Susie Q. Robin, good to see you. Melissa and Tracy and Kent. How are you doing? Good to see you, my friend. Wow. Hey, and David, good to see you as well. Think a capella forever. Love that. Ball P, good to see y'all. And Julianne Payne, our resident alchemist. And y'all know Julie, she'll tell you about the spell of letters, words, languages, folks. Ain't it the truth? All right, so let's see. Happy birthday tomorrow. Miss Trina and I, on a second look, we'll be having a guest join us, and I think you're going to enjoy the individual we have on. It's going to be fun. Yeah, so tune in. And other than that, man, the year is like going. Next, let's see, next Tuesday will be the last day of this year, this decade. Yeah, who knows? Going to get cold in January. All of us enjoying. Yesterday, I think it got ridiculous 67 degrees here, which is a tad bit above normal, but I got a sense we're going to pay for it. Don't think winter is near over. Is our good friend over David over at Adapt 2020. Going to get cold, folks. Going to get real cold. All right, got a good thing here going on the topic. Secretum Omega, the secret origins, the secret beginning. Something that we all strive to discover. Who am I? Where did I come from? How come I can only remember this life? And you take it into weighing it on the scales. Most people don't remember much of their lives. As they continue to progress, they begin to lose and regress those memories. And I contend, if you don't have memories of the experience, how do you have any proof of the journey? Seriously, think about it. If memories don't define consciousness, then what are memories for? No, memories, it's our own little treasure box. Only you've experienced. Now, you've experienced the experienced with others, but they have their own little treasure box. So each of us have our own little treasure box, and in there, it's the good, the bad, the ugly. It's what life was. And think about it. It's what defines us. So getting into that. So 2020, been around long enough to see every end of year you have the predictions. And if you ever were diligent enough to go back and look at what people predicted and what actually happened, And then what did happen that was never predicted, you begin to see some of the lunacy in that. Now, having said that, there are some that do have, I don't know, I guess if you roll the dice, long enough, you're going to hit, either a 7 or 11, I don't know. But nevertheless, it is always fun to see how much of that comes true. And I can tell you for the most part, things have a way of happening that many of us don't anticipate. It's like, well, okay. Didn't see that coming. I don't know. What is the future? How do you define the future? Is the future already set? Oh, we'll have fun in 2020 ever discussing some of those, but I have a sense that we're going to be finding a lot of relevancy in what this channel presents in the form of content. And this channel is about free thinking. It's about philosophy. It's about ideologies. It's about theology. It's about physics. It's about existence of who and what we are. What exists after that? Is there any way that we can peer back the curtains and get a preview? Because it appears that, we may be over there longer than we were here. So that would warrant, keeping an eye on things to see if we have some insight. So going forward, I did a program this week, by the way, will be basically, we're going to recap some of the better, more viewed programs. And thank you all. I appreciate it. And you've made, hey, Cheesesteak, haven't seen you in there in a while. Good to see you. And one that's been requested quite a bit is the Secretum Omega. Now, this Pope is, how should we say, he's rewriting and reshuffling the deck. He's already saying that the church is irrelevant. That's what he said. Yesterday in this article, he said, you Christians, stop proselytizing. Stop spreading the gospel. He says, you're doing us more harm than you are good. He said, if you truly are going to live the faith, then let your life be a testimony. Well, there becomes the problem, because no one lives the faith. And as a result, we're seeing this man who was an outsider, much like a Donald Trump. This guy was an outsider, was a long shot of ever making it to the Pope. And we know his predecessor retired. Popes don't retire. They die to retire. So, this is the first time, I don't know, maybe in apostolic history, it may be the first time that we've had two living popes. But in any case, this guy is really upsetting the apple cart. You can read the stories. He's saying that the church is 200 years out of date. I think we all know far out of date, however you want to describe relevancy. But nevertheless, this church, this religion is one that has dictated, for the most part, for most of the modern era. But it is also it's responsible for the darkest hour. In this article in the Wall Street Journal, it says Pope Francis says the church must adapt to a post-Christian West. Yeah, it gets interesting. Again, going over to here on Fox News, again, excuse me, don't know why that did that. It's talking about rigidity. He says it's irrelevant now. I don't know what that means, because as I'm reading between the lines, he's saying, listen, priests need to be married. Nuns need to be married. I mean, they're talking, he's saying that they must begin to allow gays transsexuals. The church must begin to be inclusive in order to be relevant. So that is a different take on things. No doubt that this guy is, again, rewriting the books across the table. I think he may be the one that will, in fact, bring out the treaty that the Vatican made with the representatives. So have fun. This is going to be fun. He really is rewriting the playbook. And, you know, regardless of what they say about the Second Vatican Council II, it is now, in fact, I have the video, we'll be playing it, where one of the nuns of one particular cloister has come out and said that the Pope is the devil himself, that it is his plan to bring universalism into the church. Well, folks, that's really not news. When the Pope brought in the representative of the Jewish faith, he brought in the imam that represents Islam, and they made a covenant there in the Vatican Gardens. That was the start of it. And are we seeing the unification of basically the blending of the top three religions of the world? And if that's the case, then what that is saying that God is not who God is. Now, that plays a particular important role where the ETs are concerned. So without any further ado, let's get right into it, because this is going to be interesting. Now, I do have the PDF on where you can get the entire story. You can read it for yourself. So here we go. What is the secret beginning? Did it happen? Is this story real? Is it fake? Is it disinformation? What is it? Well, let me tell you, as everyone knows, this is how truth is usually sent out. It's usually sent out in the form of disinformation, because the disinformation, remember, everything is reversed. If they're giving you the information, then that is disinformation. But if they're telling you, well, this is disinformation, and allowing that label to be associated with that, you can pretty much go with the odds that it's going to be information. So here is the key talking point to today's discussion. They don't believe in our God. It's critically important, because if they don't believe ETs in our God, then that completely eviscerates the foundation for all religion. It means that we were programmed to believe in a deity of some kind. We are programmed to believe that we are somehow lesser. We are programmed to rely not on our own instincts, but that of an unseen, undefined, never present, imaginative idea that we call God. And whether that pisses you off or not, well, I really don't care. If it does, then you can leave. But if you want to be broaden out and find out why there's so many modern gods and why not one single of these gods have ever appeared and ever stepped forward, this may be your opportunity. So, key point, ET does not believe in our God. Period. This is the confession of a Jesuit who, as we will discover, knew those who were involved in actually writing the pact between the Vatican and the aliens. Our story starts, and you have to forgive me, folks, because there we go. And let me hide that. Okay, good. This is an Italian investigative journalist who believed he had found sufficient evidence to confirm the existence of a top secret Vatican organization, Servizio Informazionale it's like the CIA. It's their top brass up there, the Vatican Intelligence Service, that allegedly specializes in extraterrestrial affairs and the return of Planet X. Weird, I know. The journalists also helped confirm the existence of a Vatican security clearance known as Secretum Omega that governs access to this information. Well, it would make sense. I mean, if they've got rumored to have 51 miles of documents, I can't even imagine. So the layers of, obviously, security would be intense. Did y'all hear yesterday with Jeffrey and I over on our Sunday morning show where Joseph Atwill brought out the fact that Nero's circus, where, you know, the gladiators and everybody else that was a minority apparently got entered into the games. Well, you know, that blood-soaked ground is where the Vatican is built upon. Think about this, folks. So he said that this helped explain why Vatican insiders such as Monsignor Corrado Balducci, and many of you people know who Monsignor Balducci is, appears to be out of the loop when it comes to such information. It went on to say that this was revealed in a personal conversation he had back with him in October 2005. The secret Vatican organization, we'll call it SIV, was first revealed in the research of Cristoforo Barbato, who described how he was approached by email in 2000 by a Jesuit member of the CIV and later personally met with him in 2001. The Jesuit, who remains anonymous, confirmed the following: that in 1954, Eisenhower extraterrestrial meeting, and we hear that from Laura as well, that George Adamski did have secret meetings with the Pope, and the return of Planet X and the existence of the U.S. hyperspeed vehicle Aurora capable of space travel. Folks, we're already out there. Yeah. There was a deal made. Let me tell you, us, you know, the book of Og talked about the smaller cells being sacrificed. They're doing the same thing to us. Just my opinion, but from what I've been able to ascertain, I think that there was a deal made with every government here, every major government, that these creatures would harvest a certain amount of humans. Yeah, take it for what you want. Give me 1 second here. There we go. All right, so yes, ET exists. No, ET does not believe in God. Yes, it apparently appears they control us, although they don't want you to actually think any of that. Was there an actual meeting? Is there a celestial object on its way to Earth? Do aliens live on this planet? Are there other civilizations? Are there different species? Do aliens worship God? I mean, that's a question. Is it the same God? Is God an alien himself? I mean, these were the questions. I mean, the Vatican owns Lucifer. The decoy one is in Arizona. The real one is up in Alaska. Have they been able to see something that we haven't? I mean, what's really going on? You know, are we advancing further away from this story, or is this story becoming ever more advancing upon us? It's really kind of, you just determine what you want to. You know, there are some things that, well, it's hard to determine what is truth and what is not truth. I mean, it's just that simple, folks. It really is. All right. So as the story goes, the guy that's talking with this Jesuit says that the SIV includes elements from different realities. Think about that. different realities. Assign whatever you want to that word. Excuse me, I just find it interesting that that word was used at all. All closely related to the church, and especially composed, at least in the executive part, by priests mostly belonging to the order of the Jesuits, the Benedictines, and the sisters. Around a little over 100 elements. That's what they're called. It may seem few, but not so when you consider that in every part of the world where there is a priest or a nun is a potential source of valuable information. So what they're saying, folks, the spread of Christianity through the church, the ulterior point really was to have spies giving information back to the Vatican. Now, that's clever. Think about it. No government could do that to the extent that a religion can. Anyway, other elements were and still are followed in environments and institutions to secular character within the church, such as humanitarian associations, political parties close to the Holy See, Catholic youth movements, etc. My process was very similar to this. In summary, the elements, like me, were secretly followed, directed, and formed according to a certain criteria known in certain environments. Everyone now realizes that he had in the past one of his guardian angels and mentors. You know, it's an effective, it's up there. I mean, you think about this. That's pretty damn clever. He said, could you tell me more of the items on the SIV? Why was it created? How long has it been in the works? You know, yada, yada, yada. And so the individual, the Jesuit, answers, the structure is top secret, but now I can tell you that it is organized in a similar way to other intelligence structures such as the CIA, M16, and the former KGB. And remember, the KGB still exists. It's, in fact, their head guy is the president of the country. So you can only imagine what the rebirth of that intelligent organization must be like. It has no official fixed place, but chooses a site from time to time to meet, but always in facilities under the jurisdiction of the Vatican City. There are a couple of good books that, you know, you should read if you're really into good fiction on this. The Gods of Eden is a good book. I mean, it'll track a lot to this. All right. From a chronological point of view, the spark that triggered the start of the organization comes from an event that occurred in the first half of the 1950s in the United States. To be exact, in February 1954. The event in question was the meeting of an alien delegation that took place in California in the base of Muroc Airfield, which later became the home of Edwards Air Force Base. Muroc, I always found that's an interesting name. But anyway, because you can see linguistically how it can be tied to something. Yeah, anyway. Along with President Dwight Eisenhower, and who attended as well, was the then Bishop of Los Angeles, James Francis McIntyre. The meeting was suitably filmed by the military with 3 16mm cameras located at various points, loaded with color film, and that's a big deal, folks. In 1954, they didn't have cell phones. Cameras were a big deal. They didn't have disposable cameras, and film for shooting in color was even more rare. Most people could not afford that. Anyway, so and a manual motor and spring-loaded, very important. You know, I come out of the film industry. This is some of the key points. While I know that this is someone Let's know what they're talking about. You don't get into minutia of detail like this unless someone was there. And there was a reason for the spring-loaded manual motors. The latter solution, rather uncomfortable because it forced all operators to change the reel every 3 minutes. I mean, they're literally doing this. It was necessary because in the presence of the aliens and their spacecraft, electric motors of the larger cameras could not work. There were shot a total of 7 rollers from 30 meters for a total of about 20 minutes of film. At the end, every member of the Earth delegation solemnly swore he should not to tell anyone what we have seen and heard from the aliens. He says, don't ask me what happened to the film because he says, I think you already know. However, in the following days, Father McIntyre, probably disappointed that he had sworn an oath that he conscientiously considered unfair. He left in a hurry to Rome in order to meet with the Holy Father, Pius XII, to tell him of the incredible event. But before Bishop McIntyre could reach Italy, he had to make one stop first in New York and then set off for Rome, all with the help of a private plane. That had to be something back then. I mean, in flying back in 1954, well, you know, it wasn't quite the thing that we have today. The aircraft took off at first from Los Angeles, about an hour and a half flight, because a sudden technical problem had forced it to land in the middle of the night on an airport runway called Sky Heaven, a site in Las Vegas. During the period required to repair the plane, which was about an hour and a half, a man showed up with military credentials of the U.S. Armed Forces. Now, the Air Force was just beginning to be formed at this point. He was a United States Air Force colonel. He was received by McIntyre. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes, during which the man distrusted the bishop from reporting accurately the whole affair that he had witnessed, as the whole alien question was already the subject of study and control in a number of years that had been exercised as a prerogative of the United States Air Force. The military stressed that the president had asked just an opinion. Now, Eisenhower had to know this. This is a big, big deal. You understand? This is a complete paradigm for humanity. Eisenhower asked just one opinion of the spiritual nature, and especially for discernment in this very unusual situation, and that the oath was not referring only to possible disclosure of such an event, but to the whole world, but also to the extent to the Holy Father. In other words, they didn't want the Pope to know what really was going on here. At least the problem of infiltration of Soviet spies within the Vatican itself. So, you know, the United States was convinced that spies and the Soviets were everywhere within the Vatican itself. And who knows? Most likely there was. I don't know. I think the Vatican is, you know, I think it swings both ways, metaphorically. All right. So the bishop replied that he was under duty to report to the Pope this incredible event. Today, it is inclined to think that the failure was previously wanted to give rise to this meeting, organized by some military, probably unbeknownst to Eisenhower himself. And that's what Eisenhower found out. You know, he helped create this thing, and then it turned on him. Imagine that. Before departing, the military man told the bishop that the decision to bring the news to Rome would create serious problems, and he personally would have cost a lot. In other words, you may pay with your life. By the way, how much of that encounter with the aliens had been predicted for some divine character message is not known. A lot of takes on this, folks. 2 days later, Pope Pius XII received Bishop McIntyre. After meditating a lot on the implications that could have had a purely military relationship with the aliens, the Pope decided to set up a secret intelligence service. He already found out that, listen, these cats don't believe me, they don't like me, and, I may be the Pope, the representative of God on the planet, but they can still take me out. So that's when he said, all right, with a name along the lines of the fascist military intelligence services. Imagine that. So the SIV, in fact, that it should have gathered all the information possible about the activities of the alien entity and the information upon which they would reap the Americans. It was vital to keep open channels of communication with President Eisenhower. The SIV was basically constituted to acquire and handle all of the confidential information which dealt largely with the extraterrestrial issue in coordination with other intelligent facilities in other countries. I don't think that many of us fully grasp that if this meeting did, in fact, I believe it did, in fact, happen. It may not happen exactly like they write it here, but listen, I think it did happen. Folks, when you announce to the world that there are aliens and they don't believe in our God, that's a repercussion of cognitive dissonance that many, and that's the big, big concern. Listen, when you combined all of these top three religions, you got basically about 4 billion people in one form or another that are believing in it. And you come out and you tell those 4 billion plus the other 3.5, nearly 4 billion that have other gods, don't believe in it, and you tell them, well, this whole God thing is a make-up story. Well, brother and sister, you got panic in the streets. And that ain't no BS. We may be enlightened enough to accept that, but the vast majority of the masses are not. So he said, all right, so they convened a meeting by the President of the United States in the middle of the night for help and spiritual support in a situation that could be called unique in modern human history. I think it is only a sign of respect and trust. To confirm this, I say that once back in the United States, McIntyre and Archbishop Edward Mooney of Detroit later were the main coordinators of the operation, passing the information to the Vatican. And Mooney had a direct connection to Eisenhower. However, events took an unexpected turn because McIntyre and the other members of the SIV began to have direct meetings in the absence and without the knowledge of the military with an alien race of the Nordic type, apparently positive from the Pleiades. These aliens had been warned by the beings that were previously met by the Americans in the California desert. And apparently, as the story goes, that meeting in the desert, the military had secret cameras. And in fact, you may actually see some of what they purported to be this footage of, and now you can understand why it's so badly in the composition it is, because now you know how they filmed it. There was obviously a heavy electromagnetic field around that. And no doubt that this was going to be picked up on the film as well. So apparently they found out about that. The aliens did. There was, I think, 4 representing a much larger council of approximately 200 plus other species. So the story goes. And when the alien delegation found out about those other cameras, well, they were really pissed because, and amazingly, they exhibited attributes of ESP. All right, so these meetings with the members of the SIV occurred several times in the U.S. and twice also inside, are you ready for this? The Vatican Gardens. Folks, yeah, Many of you are putting the dots together. At the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, in the presence of the same Pope Pius XII. This was a crisis like no other crisis ever. You have to understand, in Western culture, whether you want to accept this or not, the Catholic Church owns our ass. It wasn't until, what we would call the Renaissance era that began to lead into the Industrial Revolution, and it's taken, and so we understand modern Christianity, Protestantism, is a new religion in the Catholic religion. Protestantism is less than 500 years old. Much of what is practiced here in the United States, Southern Baptist, those things, that religion of Christianity is a very young form of the religion because they'll tell you they don't take anything from the Vatican, but they do. Anyway, it gets interesting. So the story went on that, well, then how do these beings look at us? If they don't have sin, then there's something else going on. And the Jesuit says, of course. But these beings who now tell us they are living on a flat plane, so to speak. I know I researched this over a year ago, and I can tell you, it has so many clues into this. Flat plane, what? Different, though not angels in the true sense of the word, while the Nordic aliens that I mentioned are beings of flesh and blood, which, although very evolved from a technological and spiritual point of view, have their corporality. So there is a spiritualness to them. These creatures, isn't it interesting? They call them creatures. Not a species, not, human. So these creatures asserted that they had found in the Catholic Church, or more precisely in the Christo message, not so much the physical church, they are seeking the real presence of God and declared themselves willing to cooperate for the good of humanity. So there was kind of a detente made. It was this statement by these beings that convinced the pontiff that, well, it may be well worth to get in a deal with them, and considering them even authentic converts to Christian faith. Now, there is a die-in-the-wool, adamant proselytizer. This Pope was saying, all right, they may not believe in our God, they may not understand the message, but hey, we can maybe convert them. That's interesting. Probably the Pope thought that the universal church, very important here, folks, was to begin to extend his message even to the beings from other worlds. Admirable. However, there's always a but. These aliens in the following years were of decisive help for the Church of Rome in carrying out specific tasks in the world. They specifically intervened in certain political situations and social global on this planet. I invite you to reread what was written at the time of Alberto Peregro, the consul, in some of his books and author's notes. If this is true, we all need to be concerned, because it means that they have now taken a side at this point of a particular ideology. And that to me is a little distressing. Think about it. Following Pope John the 12th benefited from the support of these beings who seem to have had espoused the cause of Christianity, but chose to make it about the more vague angelic interventions. So they're They're turning it more to who and what they are, because they realize that us humans, when they see these, apparently these light beings of some nature, they see them as angels. Weird. Maybe not. Pope John had inherited, so to speak, a cooperation agreement between the Holy See and the positive aliens of the Nordic race made with the predecessors. And folks, yes, there is a negative aliens. This went on for the duration of the pontificate of Pope Roncalli, who, however, had repeatedly expressed to the pinnacle of the SIV his disappointment at the extreme confidence that it was putting in those creatures, so that today you would think that one of the reasons which gave way to the Second Vatican Council, it was precisely the need to do a first concrete step towards renewal of the church, also in view of possible, and then they changed the word to intimate contact. They've had decades to work this out. So there is George Adamski. He met with the Pope right on this subject. It goes on to say, I was just getting Adamski ready to meet the Pope. He went to St. Peter's just once to meet with the Pope, who had already decided that the church no longer had to maintain direct relations and cooperation with the aliens. Though positive, John the 13th also found it unacceptable that such a relationship was revealed to the Christian people. The task given by aliens to Adamski was to rope an extreme and last agreement with the dying pontiff. He was a messenger on behalf of the same beings who met with Pope Pius the 12th. Excuse me, I said the 13th is 23rd. These entities commissioned the same Adamski to deliver a gift to the Pope. The letter, which contained a liquid substance that would disappear in a few days, the gastric and folks, I have a problem with this word, hydrodala, from which he was suffering, worsened in the last few hours to acute peritonitis. The Pope did not drink the stuff. He said on his deathbed, watching the crucifix, "Those arms spread of the Christ have been the program of my pontificate, a humble and modest pontificate as you like, but which I assumed all responsibility. I am happy with what I did and how I did it." However, this gesture by aliens did conclude with the Pope, and with that little lucidity and energy he had left, that these brothers of the cosmos, as he called them, could have led a task definitely positive and benevolent towards humanity, but they would have to operate independently and separately to the church, and in general, by the works of man who, through prayer, acts according to the law of God, and in particular, under the action of the Holy Spirit. So he called them brothers of the cosmos. There was an attempt with this attempt, which ended obviously where the Pope wasn't going to have anything to do with them anymore. And this is, can you imagine getting into the job and you're reading this, right? Our president doesn't even get kind of this information. So his successor, which was John the 23rd, he expressed that, well, probably the same thing. I think they came to the point that if there was going to be a cooperation, how do you go about this? I mean, I can see exactly where this Pope was coming from. People wouldn't be able to handle it. I mean, if you think about, proselytizing them, converting aliens to a religion on earth, well, that's even weirder. How do you go about doing that? So the sense in a nutshell is this, is that the presumed positive activity of these aliens. Now, I think these aliens felt betrayed as well. I mean, I think they felt that they had a contract. And then here's this religious figure broke his word. And I mean, they even went out and did things on behalf of the church. That's weird. Who had joined the Christ message should not be hindered, but blessed, but had to be separated and parallel activity to that of the church. The aliens were therefore considered the same way as the stranger who healed in the name of Christ, and these did not prevent him to do so. In this sense, it should be added to the speech that the new pontiff, who began with the deceased Pius XII, made on April 5th, 1961, when addressing the crowd which met in St. Peter's Square for the general audience, he said, "Some voices are speaking that before were unknown to us, but it's their voices that are speaking from heaven down to earth, rumors that the reflection of the omnipotence of the Heavenly Father." You could say in one aspect, they already made disclosure. They just decided they weren't going to play ball. Now, this brings up a question then, who did play ball? Oh, ball. Boy, that was a pun that was not intended. He said he wanted to speak duties. He said, "My task was purely technical. The most important were receiving secret information from a Vatican radio telescope located in Alaska and turn them to their respective destinations." Now, this guy says, well, one minute here. Well, what radio telescope are you talking about? I do not know that the Vatican possessed such a structure in that area. Jesuit said, well, the Vatican owns and operates a highly advanced radio telescope adopting systems and technologies performed only by personal belongings to the order of the Jesuits, and that it is housed in an industrial plant for the recovery of oil, apparently located in the U.S. state. The complex is camouflaged because officially the activities that take place are not the same as the structure of the VAT telescope in Arizona and are covered by the utmost secrecy. Now, Lucifer, the destination, X stands for Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. They're looking for something. I don't know what. That's the thing. So he wanted to know more. He said, well, what I can say is that it was built in 1990 with the aim of studying celestial anomalous bodies approaching the Earth, similar to what was done, for example, by the CIA, that among many of his secret eyes included the Hubble telescope twin, Skyhole 12. You didn't know that Hubble had a twin, did you? Moreover, the SIV was informed during meetings with Pius XII of the approach of a celestial body in the solar system, host of an alien race, evolved and very warlike. I learned very quickly that the material that I had gotten here in Rome and processed on my computer was very interesting and very secret. It was during the processing of certain data and information from this radio telescope that a probe sent in remote space, inserted into a space exploration program started in the early 1990s called Silo, he had photographed a huge planet approaching our solar system. I don't know how much of this is fact, but it's part of the story. The data was received in Alaska in October 1995. Here began my problems. I discovered that I had not decrypted the data coming from the transmission session and created a dangerous situation. It was then that my contact told me that within the Vatican were cohabitating two factions that vied for the management of a type of information with a level of security far superior to that of top secret. The probe called Shalom, I said Silo, Shalom, takes its name from the space exploration program started in the early 90s. I can also add that the Shalom program is in turn inserted into another more extensive program called, I think that's Kermagma, Magma. I think I got that right. The nature of the latter and other subprograms that make it up, and it was not to be revealed by anything. So in other words, people that were working on the Kerigma project were probably not really knowing what was put into the other additional payload. For now, I can tell you that the probe has been assembled at Area 51, had a motor electromagnetic pulse, and once completed, was placed into orbit by an aircraft of the class type Aurora. Interesting. The probe did not have calculations and pre-launched on a trajectory and precise Nubarian location, whereby its purpose was the planet correcting the route as much as possible, and then reverting to the solar system at a distance such as to be able to transmit the data and images to the radio telescope. So what they were doing was doing a daisy chain. Apparently we have the ability to go outside our solar system, and by a great deal. Said in its secret position in Alaska, the probe was launched after completion of the telescope and carried out the transmission of filming in 1995. Now, I don't know how much of that is there or not. Then he's asking about stitching, which, my opinion on stitching. Yes, at least in the major aspects, I can tell you for sure is that the SIV, in collaboration with Lockheed Martin, sent that probe who created the images for me to elaborate on. It is a very large celestial body that within a maximum of 3 years, starting in 2001, will feel its presence in the solar system. So it currently, you have to have this usufructual authorization. Supervisor called this Secretum Omega. This is the highest classification of secrecy in the Vatican, equivalent to cosmic top secret at NATO. It is divided into 3 levels of information. The least detailed Secretum Omega level 3, Secretum Omega 1, which is the most comprehensive. My task now is to form new elements of the SIV and start them to use for its communication systems of that body. So he goes on to say, in Italy, there are radio and antennas along with 2 geostationary satellites over Italy itself of an American telecommunications company, Sprint International, which is the north and the far south of Italy. The company has a special contract with the SIV and on a private channel sends and receives data encrypted with the algorithm for confidentiality and a personal encryption in use since 1994, before the SIV used a cryptonic system invented by the Swiss company, which was later abandoned because one of the members of this society sold it clandestinely to the Israelis. More technical information for now, I cannot give you. So, gets into Monsignor Balducci about his comments. He says, surely Father Balducci has conducted his studies and his research in a fully autonomous manner without following any type of previously established program. In his research, he has never been hampered, and in some conditions, it was in some ways encouraged. So, I know we're getting late on this. So, obviously, they say that there's something coming. They realize the aliens don't believe in the whole Christian, the Abrahamic belief systems, but they like the message. They're apparently looking for spirituality too. Well, there you go. We are very much aware, according to the system, but be aware that certain events that are about to occur involve all living beings on the planet, bar none. All of humanity in this present historical phase is experiencing a very special time and closely linked to some key events contained in the book of Revelation. Mankind must rely completely on the message of salvation, the redemption of Christ, what St. Paul called the Kerygma. I know I butchered that, but anyway. What John Paul II seeks to bring all nations of the world, he believes that the Pope does not know how close they are to certain events that are to happen. So the Pope is apparently somewhat outside the loop. John Paul, it was said that this was his way of preparing the earth in his time, which he was pretty a cool Pope, I think. Anyway, Vatican insiders, there are two currents in opposition. One is an advocate of this information program, and it is defended body and soul from Rotatola. I think that's the last Pope that was there, and others is outstretched to impede access to any means, to such an extent that some elements of this faction are also part of the occult power groups that, to make as an example, control the world oil markets that is currently impacting on various international economies, with the sole purpose of crushing any initiative linked to the spread of clean energy alternatives. Folks, the thing that I don't understand, we should have never even gotten into oil. The first cars were electric. Yeah, anyway, you can go off on that tangent. Groups such as the one to which you can bring the story of a famous and controversial case of UFO guardian that you know, dramatically true for the most part, except that relating to the frames of the alleged alien entities. However, the printed documentation and information contained herein describes a real situation. The reality often exceeds the wildest fantasy. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. But the occult organizations are the apex of the SVS. So this is the counter group. So it's saying, it's mind-blowing when you think about this, that they're saying that there is actually a cult, dark forces in the Vatican. These men knew. They knew what was happening. It was the beginning of the end. They knew it. This is why the Second Council of the Vatican was called. The underlying thing that was not reported was the pact that's apparently gotten us into some troubles. Look at the temple, folks. This shit's not made up, folks. They do not worship our gods. That's the best I can tell you, folks. Let me get out of here. Yeah. So there you go. Ba-ba-dum. So what do you make of it? You know, I figure it's like this. If something's coming, I want to be as much aware as I can be, you know? And if these cats that are out from wherever, they live on a flat plane. I mean, this is weird stuff. It's confusing. It's ambiguity leads us. What? Well, Nick, thank you. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Happy holidays to you. Very, very, very kind. That's going to go to a good place, my friend. Thank you. So, again, if there's something coming, then I want to be at least, going, okay, I don't want to be motivated by fear. I mean, I'd rather know and say, okay, it's eventually going to get here. All right, folks, let's get our act together and, let's not hate each other. Let's see if we can find some unity, and let's see if we can find a common cause that expands outside of religious theology, that's more inclusive of humanity. I mean, and now you can understand why this Pope is moving to the universal church. Oh, folks, you can't make this shit up. Excuse me, you can't make this stuff up. And we're seeing it play out before us. And what's so interesting is that apparently with this meeting that took place was nearly 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. Hard to imagine that. And we get to look back and say, all right, so how much of this is credible and how much is not? Well, we're seeing, I think, from the outside that there are dramatic changes underway. And many of us here, other communities, other channels, other organizations outside of, the YouTube community, etc., they have sensed this. We've all sensed it. The Vatican, the Pope knew, Pius XII knew that something was going to be impacting humans, that there would be no escape. Is this the cosmic rays we're seeing? Is this the impact? Because cosmic rays, folks, and we're seeing it, drives our species cuckoo. It makes this back crap crazy. And you go, now, wait a minute. So I don't know. I've kind of gone over, but wow. I mean, so this is what this whole week's going to be. We're going to look at it, and I think what we're going to find is that this thread is threaded throughout all of this. I mean, there's an awakening. There's no doubt about it. I know that is overused and has been homogenized and, regurgitated, but there is an awakening taking place. The world leaders know about it. The world religious leaders know about it. This article, particularly as I close out, that you can read yesterday, just you can go to any one of the oracles and just type it in. What this Pope said about proselytizing, telling Christians to stop evangelizing. He says, he says, we have to understand that there are many other beliefs and other gods, not just this one. And that the best way to show our God is by your lifestyle. Now, you can sign that what you want, but that's a major break, Oh, folks, we live in some interesting times. Well, all right, folks, join me tomorrow with Miss Trina and our special guest. I think you're going to enjoy him. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for being a part of this community. It's been a wonderful, wonderful year. We have all shows that we're going to go all the way up to New Year's. We're even going to do a show on New Year's Day. And thank you, Mother Nature. Thank you. Thank you, Blaze and Remember. So, folks, we're writing this thing together. Now, we've lost some people this year in our community. They're on the other side. I have no doubt they're rocking and rolling right with us, saying, yeah, they're getting it. I hope they got the whole picture. I mean, I truly do. I don't want to end up on their side and go, what? I was supposed to buy a map. So Anyway, all right, folks. I'll see you tomorrow. And hey, 2020 is going to be far out. That's all I got to say. All right. Much love and peace to you all. All right. Bye-bye.